Alrighty, on the bench today, you've got a late model MS201tc M. So this is your MTronic version of your 201. Fancy wires and stuff in there. And these are great. It seems like we have a no spark problem here. Okay, how are you going to know you have a failing coil? You know, most times when these let go, it's a slow, painful process. You know, one day saw shuts off for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It fires right back up. It runs perfectly before and after it just shut off for no particular reason at all, Jenny. And this starts happening a little bit more often. You know, maybe it starts off as weekly, bi-weekly, next thing you know it's daily, now it's multiple times during the day, and next thing you know this only runs for a minute or less, or if you keep delaying this inevitable process, it's going to shut off after 10 to 20 seconds of runtime, whether it's idling or revving or whatever. There's just some resistance issue in this coil. So that will be the idea, that you need to get a $150 coil from the dealer to replace this to keep your $900 saw going. Okay, so we've got a bad ignition coil, and I have been seeing this over the last year or so. I even reached out to a friend of mine at Steel and said, hey, is there a technical service bulletin about this? Is there a new part number? Is there something? Nah, nothing. I've probably replaced a dozen of these coils on the newest iteration. And for the most part, they can be like 1 year to, several months old. So there was obviously an issue, because in my hand, I have the new and improved Still version 3 MTronic ignition module. So let me take you in and I'll show you what to look for. Okay, visually, you're gonna see this when you take the side cover or your starter cover off, and your ignition module is going to be bolted in right here. What you'll be able to see is, this is the old one. That's not that old. Let me see, there we go. Glare's kind of getting me pretty good. But there's virtually no difference in these two. Now, what you will see is that on the back side of this coil, that you won't see until you unbolt it, is that on this newest version, it actually shows the new part number. If you look it up on Steel's part lookup, then you'll see, oh gosh, focus, 1145 400 4713 on the back. And hopefully this is new and improved. Let me grab the box, and that way you can get a better look at the part number. So that's supposedly new improved. Replacement on this isn't too terribly bad. If you work on these every day, it's a breeze. If you don't work on them every day, I hope you got a lot of patience. So there's a plastic guard that goes right here. That's where your ignition coil line goes, and it crosses over the top of the tank. You don't have to take the tank off. There's enough flex in this unit where you can lift up and then disconnect the spark plug boot and then run it back through. But there are places like right there that your ignition wire goes into, and on this side it has to go in there, and this little plastic piece, oh gosh, handle's in the way. God, I need a better cameraman. This, don't just lay that on there. This has to snap in there. Okay, there's a little tab right over here that has to click into place, and then you can put your ignition module, bolt it down, and obviously air gap your thing. If you're not comfortable with that, don't do it. And then the rest of it is just, cake decorating. Just put everything back together until, you know, there's nothing left in your nut and bolt tray. All right, that's what it ought to look like when it's snapped in. All this is nice and flush. There's no ridge right there. And then if you can look, I don't know if you can see, I got a point. So right there, there's a little white line on the coil. That's where the bend is. And then over here, steel's nice enough. That's where you locate this and that notch and make sure it's pushed in there. And then you've got a few more things along the way. There's a retaining flathead screw that goes in there. And we'll get the rest of this buttoned up. Okay, got things buttoned back up, flywheel's on, coil's gapped to the magnets. I did notice, and this is a relatively lightly used saw, there was some sawdust on this carb base, or this air filter base. On the 201s, you really got to give Husky and Steel some credit. You know, when you put this air filter on, don't just lay it on there and then put the cover on. You should hear it snap, because there's actually a groove that goes all the way around. Come on. Whoops. Ah, well, I made it snap one time. It should, but you know, don't. Ah. There. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear that positive snap into place, and then you're good to go to put this on. Put the rest of this back together. Okay, just a friendly reminder, if you're going to do your own muffler mod, that's fine, but leave the spark arrestor in here. Now you can trim this off if you want your stuff to flow, because there's actually a restriction behind right here. But what will happen, and you can see some of the effects of not cleansing the housing, you know, all that heat stays in here. But the only problem, especially with this, there is no amount of material removal you can do right in here to make that ever stop. So you have to put, you know, that slot has got to be covered. Otherwise, this housing is going to be ruined. And if you're in the tree and it's on the sling, it's going to burn your ass. Okay, spark arrestor's back in. Clearance this just a little bit so that way we don't burn any more plastic and you're still protected from the hot muffler. I made a handful of cuts with this. We'll talk about it inside. Let's wrap this video up. The internet will tell you that I should have, because this is a version 3, run a recalibration on that, where you put it in the choke position, triangle, if you will, pull the cord, let it run on choke for 30 plus seconds, 30 to 45 seconds, pin the throttle, let it go through its recalibration, let go of the throttle when it's done, let it idle for 30 seconds, and supposedly everything's great. I would much rather cut with it. I've had a saw pass a calibration that acted up, that still may have had an issue. A recalibration doesn't make everything perfect in the world. So actually running it, and of course, you know, it samples like 10 times a second or something like that. So as long as you're got a good sharp chain and you're cutting with nice firm pressure, it is going to do any tuning that it needs to do since the last time it ran. So with that being said, I think it's more important to run it than it is to reset, recalibrate, whichever version applies to your situation. I think that's it for today. Sorry this wasn't a how-to video. I might have one out there in a previous video on how-to, but I mean, that's the general gist of it. It's not a super easy job, but it's not, you know, the end of the world, but it is a little invasive. So if you enjoyed that, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one. One last thing. I got a late model Mark II right there, 550 XP. It needs a coil as well. So for all you Husky guys going, oh, this steel, they got bad products, Ignition coils, whether they're auto tune or normal or something, you know, that's on any one of these saws, standard carburetor or not, it can fail. They're not forever.